The Focke-Wulf 190F and G-8 series sports some pretty impressive bomb loadouts and even air-to-ground rockets. They can't carry as much ordnance as a P-38, and they can't carry both bombs and rockets. It's one or the other. Nevertheless, there are some interesting options for putting the hurt on late war medium and heavy tanks. There are three specific bomb loadouts I use, and I call them the sure thing, the gamble, and the compromise. If you can drop an SC-250 reasonably close to an M4, T-34, and even a KV-1, you have a very good chance of walking away with three tanks with the three SC-250 loadout. I use the underbelly first mode, which is the default, with a bomb drop order of belly, right, and left. When you drop the right wing bomb on the second pass, the weight transfer will cause the left wing to dip a little, which is usually not a big deal, but if you couple that with pulling too hard on the stick coming out of the dive, it can go south on you really fast. The gamble loadout is 8 SD-70 bombs, 4 on the belly and 4 on the wings. The underbelly single mode is the default and the one I use, dropping bombs as singles in this order. They're not as lethal, obviously, as an SC-250, but they are much better than the SC-50. As we discussed in a previous video on the 110E2, the SC-50 bombs are not nearly as effective against the KV-1 as they used to be, even with direct hits. I never thought much about potential differences between the SC-50 and the SD-70 bombs, but after putting them to the test, I discovered if you can slam an SD-70 up against the side of a tank, that extra 20 kilos delivers consistent one-bomb kills on the KV-1 and its derivative SP gun, the SU-152. So the fact that the F and G8 can carry multiple SD-70s is fairly significant. If you are skilled, you can smoke up to 8 tanks with this loadout. If you are not, you might go home with nothing. And finally, if you're skilled but want some insurance, you have a high probability of at least 2 kills with this loadout of 2 SC-250s and 4 SD-70s, with the possibility of getting up to 6 total. This particular loadout is actually a little more lethal than my go-to loadout on the BF-110. I use the underbelly last bomb mode so I can get the SC-250s off the wings first and reduce some of that drag when I'm climbing back up to attack dive altitude. This is not the default mode, and you have to select it. As for the technique, I'm looking to start the dive as close as possible to 800 meters AGL. I'm not using some kind of virtual laser rangefinder, so I have no idea what my distance to target is at dive start, but it's pretty much the same every time, and you can take a look at these clips to get an idea. I want to start my dive with an airspeed of approximately 250 kph and ATA at 1.1 to ensure a dive speed between 450 and 500 kilometers per hour at bomb release. I keep the tank in the general area of the gun sight bottom ring line during the dive and make vertical adjustments to get on a dive angle of approximately 30 degrees. My sight picture at bomb release looks like this, and I hit the bomb release button when the tank disappears under the lower metal bezel ring of the gun sight. As soon as I hit the bomb release button, I begin pulling back the stick to start dive recovery. Now, I'm going to give you a shitload of tips on how to make this happen. These are my technique specifications. I know if I check all these blocks during the dive and hit the bomb release button when the tank goes below the bottom metal ring, the odds are very good I'm going to get that kill. Now let's talk about you. Maybe you want to come in at a different altitude, speed, or dive angle, or all of the above, and that is certainly possible. You just have to work out your sight picture and bomb release point for your own specifications. But I can only talk with any specificity about my own technique. On the 800 meter start dive altitude, I will give that about a plus or minus 5%. My dive start point doesn't have to be perfect because I can make vertical adjustments during the dive until I know I'm very close to my 30-degree dive angle. And how do I know if I'm on it? Practice until you know what the correct dive angle looks like based on visual input. I practiced it to the point that I can get my dive angle between 27 and 33 degrees, and that's close enough to work. While I'm making vertical corrections, I'll split the tank down the middle with the vertical stadia line, and that takes care of the horizontal alignment. Sometimes I'll hold the tank edge for a wing bomb, and we'll discuss that shortly. Practice until you know what the sight picture should look like just prior to bomb release. your angle, the size of the tank, and surrounding trees, building, terrain, etc. I make a distinction between a low drop and a high drop in the BF-110, but for this 190 model, I use the same drop altitude for both tanks in the open and tanks surrounded by obstacles. The one additional factor specific to this 190 I have to account for is handling volatility. If you jerk the nose too hard during dive recovery, it will go full psycho without warning and embarrass you in front of your friends. So my bomb release altitude also accounts for the altitude necessary to execute a smooth pull-up after bomb release. That pull-up has to be smooth and cautious, because if you jerk that stick, it will wing over and go crazy on you. For that reason, I keep the stabilizer trim at default. Adjusting it back just seems to exacerbate that volatility. For the first 3 or 4 bomb runs, I kick the ATA up to 1.3 as I'm climbing away from the target. It can be a laborious process if the weather is hot, but as you shed weight with each bomb, it gets easier. At 500 meters, I'll begin turning back around toward the target. And during that time, I am making ATA adjustments up or down to get to the 800-meter dive start altitude at a speed of 250 kph. Even if you come in at the correct dive angle, if your speed is not aligned with your bomb release point, it is very easy to drop short or long. If you find, for whatever reason, your speed or altitude is out of whack at dive start, you can make adjustments. If you're too low and or slow, increase ATA to help you get to bomb drop at the right speed. If you're too high or too fast at dive start, decrease your ATA all the way down to 0 if necessary. Now this next part is important. Ambient temperature has a huge effect on engine management. Hot equals too slow and cold equals too fast. You may have to make dive start altitude adjustments or ATA adjustments or both in relation to outside temperatures to maintain the correct speed at bomb release. When you're dropping wing bombs, you can place the vertical stadia line on the opposite edge of the tank if you want, instead of the tank center. Sometimes I do, but to be honest, I'm not convinced it makes much difference because they're not really that far from the center of these smaller fighter aircraft. Now let's do a quick walkthrough at reduced speed. So the dive start's 800 meters AGL. 1.1 ATA, approximately 250 kph airspeed, and I'm scanning the target area for a tank to hit. I've made my decision. I'll pull the nose over the target tank and push it down in the general direction of the tank. Once the nose is pointing down, the dive has officially begun. I then line up on the tank and start adjusting my angle until I'm in the neighborhood of 30 degrees, making sure I have enough vertical space to smoothly execute dive recovery and avoid any obstacles. Sight picture looks good, drop, and pull up smoothly. So that's a lot of shit to remember, but after you practice it and do a little trial and error of your own, you will internalize it and it will all become intuitive. It's not like I got a fucking checklist in my hand during these attack dives. I'm only thinking one of 2 things on the way down: sight picture good or sight picture bad, and I'm making adjustments based on visual input. Now I'm going to show you 2 example missions with no commentary to keep things rolling. I do say the word drop at the precise instant I hit the bomb release button, so you can clearly see my sight picture at bomb release. The first example is against tanks in the open in Limbo's SCG ground attack training server, where I popped 5 T-34s and 3 KV-1s with the Gamble loadout. And in the second one, I hit tanks on a road with tree obstacles, and I got 2 KV-1s, 4 T-34s, and a BT-7 with the same loadout. And then I got strafe kills on a BT-7 and T-70 at the end with the wing-mounted MG-150-120 cannons. Normally, I fast forward the turnarounds on these example missions, but because I want you to see the engine management process between attack dives, I'm keeping them at normal speed. Please take note of ATA adjustments up and down during the turnaround, altitude recovery prior to each dive, and the speed at each bomb drop. 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 Drop.